Does the Big 12 need Florida State if there is a sleeping giant within that state of Florida already in the conference? This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12. I am Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. That is Kyle Nash, who talks all things USF.
Careful.
Hey, watch
Careful.
it. Watch it. All things UCF, not Central Florida, all things UCF. Black and gold Banneret. If there's any expert on UCF, it's Kyle Nash. Kyle, we're going to talk today the Big 12 needing Florida State, yes or no, as well as the most underrated football teams in the Big 12 from BYU to UCF to possibly Iowa State or Colorado. And then again, the dark horse of the conference. I think that Gus Malzahn's team can be that. Off the rip here, though. We have the Sunshine State on lock with a program that is as up and coming as anyone else in the country. Does this league need a school like Florida State that the SEC and Big Ten seem to be so upset with that they can't, at least from the murmurs, hash out a deal? Do we need that? Or is UCF the possibly second coming of what they are?
You know, Drake, this is the part where I start mincing words to question. It's the use of your word need. That's the only problem I have. Does the Big 12 need them to, let's say, possibly get somebody into the Final Four of the new edition of the college football playoff? No, I don't think they do. Would it help? Absolutely. Beyond question. Because the biggest problem, especially, let's take a UCF for example. You know, obviously there's a lot more new schools than just the 4 from last year at this point. And I'm going to put Colorado off on a bubble off to the side because, well, one primetime Deion Sanders is coaching that mess and you still got Shedeur and Travis Hunter. As much as Travis Hunter doesn't take interviews, by the way, unless you're on TV, no disrespect to the young man, that's just his policy. Let's say fanfare isn't going anywhere for that program. Anybody else, the big issue, obviously, and you know this, you've said this often on the Dulce Grande. That's been a thing you've talked about is how the SEC and the Big Ten positions, such as they are, will be getting a lot of those national eyes. And while it doesn't matter necessarily to the quality on the field, it does matter to the committee members. And trust me, these humans get altered and are awfully biased if your blood happens to be blue. Doesn't help those out there that happen to be UCF, for example, these younger programs. That being said, Florida State in the building accomplishes something to get one of those air quotes big name schools, right? This is the kind of thing that adds the credibility, right? Let's use a historical reference. This is France joining the American Revolution. That's the way I look at it, right? So the other piece too that I think from a UCF perspective could be interesting, and I know it may not happen, but this is, you know, one of those pie in the sky things, right, Drake? UCF fans just can't let USF go. It's funny you say that earlier because as the only people that seem to care that USF was ever a rival, because I'll tell you at this point, I'm not one of them. I mean, granted, I do love their women's basketball program. They're awesome. They did a great job in men's basketball last year. One of 3 conference champions that UCF's men's basketball team played at some point. And they also do a lot of stuff on the diamond. But from a football perspective, it's in the rear view, man. And as much as most USF fans will loathe that, UCF fans will too. Some people think that game should still be crowbarred in. But how about this? Let's just say somehow FSU, who will never be brave enough to schedule the nights of their own accord, are forced to play them. And kind of like what happened with those people in Gainesville there with Florida at the Gus Spirilla a number of years back, right? Remember Gus's first night's bowl win? Something like that happened. Then FSU starts getting irked. Then maybe other sports key wins happen. Like, for example, when UCF beat Florida in women's basketball in the postseason, perhaps some stuff on the baseball diamond, and then you start to get the in-state rivalry back in a form that no one else would have expected, except for the fact that both teams wear some form of gold in their uniform. I see a lot of positive opportunity there. Are FSU fans on occasion annoying? Sure, but that's part of the charm, right?
Certainly it would add, and this is objective, a power brand in the Big 12 that helps the Big 12 stay alive long term. Do I believe that UCF could be a second coming of Florida State or at that caliber in Florida in 2 decades? Yes. Absolutely. Given the resources they have and given the base of Gus Malzahn, who says he wants to be there long term, if that is the case, there's a very good chance UCF is able to rise to prominence when given the resources of a power conference like the Big 12. And could we use Florida State? Absolutely. Do we need Florida State? I think the answer is no. Does Florida State want to do they want to avoid the Big 12 because UCF is there? I do think, I think the fans are looking at it like, I would never want to go to their conference, which makes me want them to come to the Big 12 even more. Kyle, moving forward, is UCF the most underrated football team in the Big 12, or is it somebody else? This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by GameTime. Oh, here is why I love GameTime. I was going to go to a Tyler Childers concert in Idaho, and then I've told these guys about this. I was going to go to the Tyler Childers concert in Idaho, and then I decided, you know what? No, I want to go to the Gorge in Washington. Really cool venue. So I went to GameTime. I was like, wait a second. I haven't bought my tickets yet, so I can move the trip around. Why haven't I bought my tickets? Because with last-minute deals, you can save up to 60% on buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more at GameTime. Flash deals, zone deals, all-in pricing. Toggle that feature to show the total upfront, no surprise fees at checkout. And right now, they have the lowest price guaranteed or 110% credit with GameTime. Download the GameTime app. Create an account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets. They're the lowest prices, and that, my friend, is guaranteed. Your next meal should come to Factor. When I tell you that Factor has changed the way that I eat over the course of the last month. Warmer, sunnier days are calling, and you can fuel up fresh. 2 minutes. That there's no, like, you don't have to cook. No, like, oh, I got to throw this in there and that ingredient. It's gonna 2 minutes, great tasting meals. 35 different meals at Factor right now with more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. Trust your wellness goals. They're all so healthy as well. Breakfast to dessert to filet mignon. I love the shrimp and blackened salmon. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, and avoid meat if you need, or simply eat well balanced. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Visit Factor and do it today. Kyle Nash joining Locked On Big 12 today, talking all things UCF. Amongst a bajillion places he works, does a lot of work for UCF's black and gold banneret. Kyle, the most underrated Big 12 teams this year. TCU would like a case. Texas Tech would like a case. Iowa State is back there. West Virginia's back there. UCF is inside of that bubble. Who is the most underrated Big 12 team in 2024?
I mean, other than BYU, I don't know who has a better claim to that than UCF. Let's think about this for just a moment. And granted, I understand that anybody who watched UCF playing the Big 12, listen, DJ Giddens was the first to expose that that defensive front like Janet Jackson in a halftime show. But DJ Giddens is an NFL-style running back, man. Yep. And they've done so much to repair that linebacker core, it's easy to write them off. You know, Josh Saliskar, Tremont Mars, Brash of the defensive ends, they've both parted ways with the program. But Malachi Lawrence and company might have a little something to say about how big a loss that actually is. Then offensively, you have 2 Maxwell Award watch list players. And we mentioned KJ Jefferson, who, you know, the ceiling would be him heading to New York for Heisman Trophy candidacy. And how about RJ Harvey, the most overlooked 1,400-yard ground gator? Listen, no disrespect to Ollie Gordon, but when he came to the bounce house, he was not the running back that made noise. Now, granted, the rain had a little to say about that, and no disrespect to the national monument that is the most beautiful mullet in America in the form of Mike Gundy, and former UCF center Jordan Johnson, by the way, amongst the offensive coaching staff there. Shouts to all of them. But yeah, that didn't go Ollie's way. And I know Ollie doesn't play defense to stop RJ Harvey, but yeah, considering all the pieces and a very ticked off Gus Malzahn, I was DMing you just today, Drake, about what was going on And this is an angry man ready to find redemption. He is absolutely torqued. That 6-7 was how the Knights finished last season, especially with all the opportunities left on the field. The Texas Tech game, the Oklahoma game, no disrespect, the Baylor game, which you saw in person. I mean, all those are just an example. I could think of more if I'm really looking, but let's just start there. Suddenly, this team is on its way to the potential of a 10-win season its first year in the Big 12. Can you imagine if they did that, what the talk would be, Drake Toll? I mean, man, listen, of course they're underrated so far.
The idea that the horses are in the stable is one that I'm not sure most people have gotten around to yet, but it is the case. And I've seen KJ Jefferson at the highest level. His offensive coordinator, Dan Enos, his last year at Arkansas, was fired midseason in his first season. That's how bad the cluster screw was in Fayetteville. And now that guy gets a second chance under Arkansas's native son, Gus Malzahn, who's going to construct an offense that is conducive to who KJ Jefferson is, a former Heisman conversation quarterback when he was playing at Arkansas. I ever watched him against Kansas in that Liberty Bowl, and he was electric. And now he's got the keys in Orlando. Kyle, when you think about it, I've got Pick Six previews right here. I love it. This is Pick Six Previews, releases a magazine. Brett Ciencia, he's a Heisman voter every year, one of the most accurate in the country. And his rankings, he has Utah at 1, Kansas State at 2, Oklahoma State at 3. None of those are too shocking. Oklahoma State being up there is something that is contested. Number 4, UCF. While the Big 12 media poll didn't see this, one of the most accurate college football magazines does. Now, that question segues into this. Kyle, Arizona, Iowa State, TCU, Kansas, West Virginia, Texas Tech, Colorado, those schools, in a matchup between any of those and UCF, do you have the utmost confidence the Knights can win, and especially on the road?
Yeah, the only team that I would struggle with is actually going to be the one that's here in the Bounce House late November on Friday, Black Friday specifically, and that's Utah, right? Yeah. If UCF is to finish 4th in the Big 12, it will be a loss to Utah that puts them there, in my mind. And listen, I had an episode of the Night Shift podcast with my Black and Gold Banneret friends. Bing! I had written an article to pull back some of the noise here I hear in Florida.
Wait a second. You cut out there for a second. What was that podcast called?
That would be the Night Shift podcast. Bing! So I love the opportunity, the shameless plug action, man. Listen, this is why you're my favorite fur-coated friend there, doing your thing for the Savannah Banana and all that. But that's okay. We're getting party animal on you here, right?
I love it.
With all that in mind, the part that I get right to is when it comes to UCF. It's easy to overlook them because something seemed to forget. Actually, I haven't had a chance to finish the research on this, but it's going to be good when I do. The number of games Gus Malzahn has coached with somebody other than his starting quarterback, Drake, he hasn't finished the season at UCF with a starting quarterback. And I can make an argument he probably didn't have a fully healthy starter halfway in the first half of a season play through, right? Yeah, I know that John Rice Plumlee went out there against Kansas. He shouldn't have been there, as we saw in the eventual curb stomping that was the Jayhawks over the Knights that particular day. But there's been so much building, and the fact that KJ Jefferson is the closest thing, in the words of Gus Malzahn, I might add, the closest thing to Cam Newton that he's coached in terms of size in a long time. Ain't nobody confusing KJ Jefferson with a baseball player, as did the very talented, albeit John Rice Plumlee. Just saying.
I like Timmy McClain. Never hated him. Never hated him. I think he deserves some flowers for what he did as a backup at UCF, keeping them competitive in certain games. And I even pointed the Baylor game, and it's not his fault that was a loss. He did everything in his power. To John Rice Plumlee, who's a damn good quarterback, who was someone that was really good at Ole Miss in 2 sports, goes to UCF and was, I'm sure, a star on campus and a star amongst the fan base.
Big deal on the baseball team too, Drake, for the record.
100%. However, those two guys are not KJ Jefferson, who's getting comps to Cam Newton, which you hit the nail on the head. Now, 4 is crazy. Nobody else in the world, this is a very accurate magazine. Nobody else in the world has them at 4. But God bless, there they are right there. Brett Ciencia does. And if UCF finishes 4th in the Big 12, it'll send shockwaves through the conference and set them up for a possible Big 12 championship victory in 2025. I believe that wholeheartedly, Kyle, and maybe they're in a spot for a Big 12 championship dark horse race especially as things get jumbled up with a lot of parity in the league this season. Up next on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show, bud. It's brought to you by eBay Motors. I have a Nissan Maxima sitting outside. I work for a baseball team. It gets hit with baseballs all the time. I just found a new little bing, on the car yesterday. And you know what? I go to eBay Motors, and eBay Motors says, hey, look, dude, you got a little, your bumper's a little dinged up from the baseballs. You call us, and we got you. Passion, drive, and patience. They got exhaust kits, LED headlights, and superchargers, roof racks, bumpers, whether you're into passion, speed, power, style. They have 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. eBay Guaranteed Fit means that your part is going to fit your ride every time or your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. All the prices that you want, all the parts that you need. It's easy to make that car the MVP today. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers, but you visit ebaymotors.com today, and they'll hook you up with those 122 million parts. That is eBay Motors. Kyle Nash joining the show talking all things UCF here as a dark horse to win the Big 12 Conference. I'll bring it up again. So this right here, Pick 6 previous, has listed its top 16, there are only 16, Big 12 teams in the conference, with like Houston at 16, BYU at 15. They got Utah winning the whole thing. Not shocking. Those things aren't crazy. Now, 15's wild for BYU.
I agree, yeah.
But UCF at 4. At 4 in the Big 12 conference. The media did not have that. Nobody else in the country has that. But this is a very accurate magazine, one of my favorites. Do you believe that's too high? Or are they truly a dark horse amongst many that should actually be in a conference championship conversation? Because that's what 4 says to me.
Yeah, I'll put it this way. That's certainly the most confident thing in the media. But listen, the media also has decided to hide R.J. Harvey in the dark as if he's a running back that doesn't even exist. So say what you will about, the media brethren out there saying what they will and all that. But listen, let's get back to it, though. What I put UCF number 4 today in my preliminary projections. I haven't officially done them yet. I like to save those for a little later in season, and I'll drop those on the Night Shift podcast soon enough. Bing! But with all that in mind, my friend, it's going to be one of those things where tiebreakers are going to, I think this division this conference at the very least is going to be that close. Tie breaks are going to determine this. And again, that Utah head-to-head, huge for this team, okay? I mean, the hugest game at the latest part of the season where everything matters that much more, man. You've seen enough college football to know how that part goes, right? Yeah. But as far as the win total and what it would take to even be in that conversation, let's say the 8, 9, 10 win range, that's certainly the best case scenario side. Like if before I do a prediction, typically, Drake, I like to do a low end, worst case, high end, best case. And getting that 8-9 win concept is certainly in that best case side. Am I picking them? If I were to produce a student of the game, Kyle Nash magazine, what's that?
And you're nailing a point, and I'm interrupting you. Yeah. 9 wins might get you to the conference championship.
Yeah.
I mean, that's ceiling. 9 wins in the Big 12 because of the parity of the league. 9-3 might get you to the conference championship. Now, if you were going to make a magazine, what would you put in it?
Yeah, if I were going to put a magazine together, Student of the Game, Kyle Nash magazine, would I put them at 4th? I am not that audacious. However, like I said, if they ended up there, I would know things broke right. I would know that KJ Jefferson's putting together something to where if he doesn't end up on a plane to New York, it would be because writers overlooked him again. For some reason, everybody still holds UCF as a villain for one of 2 reasons. A, they're new. B, they can't get the whole national championship thing out of their head. And UCF still lives there rent-free. So it's those 2 things that'll keep any actual sort of award accolades from happening. But think about it, Drake. If you live in a world where you have a 2,000 yard passing quarterback, a 12 to 1,400 yard runner, and then what is KJ Jefferson going to run over and above that? Is 500 a nice conservative estimate? If that offense sees these guys doing those things, the defense must have laid an egg for that to not be a possibility to be in those top 4 teams and knocking on the door to a potential Big 12 championship appearance, right?
I mean, KJ Jefferson's played 44 games of college football. That's a lot of games. He's thrown for 8,000 yards, rushed for almost 2,000 yards. That's a whole lot. That's a whole lot of yards. So if you combine for nearly 10,000 yards with your quarterback and 67 touchdown passes, that's good. But here's where, so you mentioned R.J. Harvey. The rankings from Jaheim White, C.J. Donaldson. I mean, I'm reading down my rankings here to Abu Sama, D.J. Giddens, Devin Neal, Taj Brooks, Ollie Gordon. Where does R.J. Harvey fit in that? Does he have potential to be the best running back in the league?
I mean, in yards, absolutely. And see, that's the thing. People aren't picking based on production. People aren't accounting for the fact that he's the central piece of that team. I would take Giddens over Ollie Gordon myself, for example, considering that last year Howard did such amazing things as a quarterback and you had a balance. If you want to see, by the way, what UCF may potentially look like, other than the fact that R.J. Harvey is just not as big as Giddens, I think Giddens might be my favorite running back in the conference, being truth be told. But that kind of combination, like Howard had with Giddens, I think you could get that sort of feel with Jefferson and Harvey. And I would think I would put 3 or 4 amongst the running backs in this league, because they are deep, Drake. I'll give them that much credit.
I think so. This league does not lack for running backs. It certainly does not lack for quarterbacks. So the same question applies. Down to Alan Bowman, who I just don't like that much at quarterback, but he went to the Big 12 championship last year. Baron Morton and Daquan Finn, who was the MAC Player of the Year, or Rocco Becht and Avery Johnson. People talk about Garrett Green at West Virginia. Cam Rising, Shadur Sanders, Noah Fafita, Jalen Daniels, KJ Jefferson. Where does KJ fit in?
And I mean, not to sound repetitive.
That's a damn good list, by the way. That's that's an insane list of quarterbacks.
As far as quarterbacks who are where they are and fit in a system and aren't going to be asked to do an overwhelming amount to put a team on their back, that's a big part of it too. Like Avery Johnson will be relying on Giddens there in Kansas State, right? But Cam Rising's a great player. Shadur Sanders is a great player. Do they have enough support in Colorado, for example? You're asking a corner, a Hall of Fame NFL corner, to now decide to purchase from the meat market and get some beef to protect his son. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. It's a much bigger question mark than Gus Malzahn rebuilding an offensive line of transfers with some foundation that's still in the building. By the way, he's done it twice before. People have just started to forget because he's done it basically every year he's been here. I asked him about that too, Drake, by the way, if the offensive line and turning that over is the biggest challenge for the offense. He said, no, we've been top 15 for the past 2 years in the nation in offense. His biggest problem, he wants more discipline, and like everything else he seems to have done here in this training camp, he's putting that on him, that the discipline wasn't there to stop the untimely offsides calls and things of that nature, untimely holding calls that basically erase third down conversions.
Yeah, also giving up large leads. Sorry, I just had to slip that.
Well, I mean, that was wow.
He graduated from Baylor. I mean, one of the most stunning, maybe the most stunning college football games that I have been to, as I'm sitting in the press box looking at all the writers going, well, this is just a crap show. This is one of the worst football. I flew to Orlando, Florida for this, and then Baylor comes back and beats UCF in a truly stunning ending against Timmy McClain and company. Going into this season, though, for UCF, I have predicted them to beat Utah on senior night. I like the Friday slot because UCF isn't that foreign to it. It's one of those things that you kind of hold over from the previous conferences that used to maybe try to schedule more Thursday or Friday. My stretch is the West Virginia game into Utah. You know, that's tough going to Morgantown, or having Arizona, or having Iowa State on the road, Florida on the road in that mix too. We'll end here. What do you think of the schedule that UCF's been dealt?
I mean, you talk about the road games and you're legitimate to mention them, but compared to flying literally more miles than anybody else in the nation last year, still pretty tame, I might add. UCF, by the way, going to the state of Arizona for the first time since the 90s or something almost. I forget. But I think, to me, the games that's the most scary would be those Arizona Wildcats. I think that trip is definitely the longest on the schedule. And, to be honest, like at one point, I think you and I both were a little higher on the Wildcats than we may be now. Yeah. But it's that uncertainty where I've noticed as a program, UCF tends to be the most, let's say, shaky, right? Just take some of these East Carolina losses there against Holden Ahlers, for goodness sake, who's like 805 years old or something, whatever, right? But for me, it's the Arizona game that's the scariest. Maybe you can help me, Drake. I can't get scared of West Virginia. Maybe I'm the problem, but
I don't know. This time last year, I predicted them at 1-11. They rattle off 9 wins. They had that. Everybody in the Big 12 had their fluky crap game. UCF against Baylor, Houston beating West Virginia. Everybody had those. Will they again this year with the amount of return production? Same question I asked about Iowa State. It's like how, Rocco Becht and Garrett Green, I kind of put in a category together of, hey, you were good last year. You're pretty consistent. Can you really put it together and become elite? KJ Jefferson's shown elite talent. I don't have that question with him. I do with some of these other quarterbacks in the middle. For you, though, Kyle Nash, my question for you, you haven't mentioned it yet. Where can people listen to more of your UCF coverage and hear you even more often?
Hey, listen, an honor, joy, and privilege. By the way, you mentioned Iowa State, and I swinging in like this will make my point perfect. Matt Campbell has a tendency to be completely underrated for the talented coach he is, and the fact that I have to say this in an afterthought proves the damn point, Drake Toll. That's what I'm saying. But, hey, listen, honor, joy, and privilege to jump in with you again. Love doing it. Find me. My writings on the blackandgoldbanneret.com, the SB Nation site covering UCF, and the podcasts where we talk about what we're covering there on the Black and Gold Banneret on the Night Shift podcast. And listen, look out this Thursday. UCF's holding their local team media day. Don't have to fly to Vegas for this one. So the Black and Gold Banneret staff will be on site to do all that. But Drake Toll, thanks for having me aboard. Until next time, my friend. Class
100%.
Dismissed.
Oh my gosh, that gets me fired up every freaking time. Class is dismissed. And I don't know, I think mine's second to yours. But this has been and always will be. Come back tomorrow. Cameron Stewart joins the show on Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.